And now, AM 650 presents your source for leading-edge news and information on today's hottest products and services. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.
Well, hello and welcome to Recovery Radio here on AM 650. On today's show, we're going to talk about the process of recovery when it comes to addiction and alcohol. And joining us in studio again today is Lorinda Strang, the Executive Director of the Orchard Recovery Center over on Bowen Island. Hello again.
Hi, Sterling.
Nice to see you, Lorinda.
Nice to see you, too.
And also with us in studio is Anne-Marie McCullough. Anne-Marie is Director of Communications and Community Relations, also at the Orchard Recovery Center. Oh, in from Bowen Island again, Anne-Marie. Nice to see you, too.
Good morning, Sterling.
Well, on the programs, I'm just going to recap some of the things that we've done so far on Recovery Radio. In the last one, for example, we talked about intervention, which was a fascinating show, and that was number 3. Back on the first show, we talked about the premise was basically, I think I have a family member or a friend who likely has an addiction, and we talked about what some of the early signs of addiction look like. On the second show, we got past that. We got to the point where someone who would, for example, pick up the phone and call you at the Orchard saying something like, well, you know, I'm certain. There's no guessing here at all. I know I have a family member or friend who likely has some kind of addiction issue. So we talked about what some of the early signs of addiction look like and some of the early remedies that can be taken by concerned friends and relatives. On the last show, I have most definitely a friend or family member who has, again, an addiction problem. How can Orchard Recovery Center assist? And then we talked about, with our guest from Global Interventions, what exactly occurs when a professional interventionist enters the picture. And Lorinda, that was an absolutely fascinating show. I had never met an interventionist before. I'd seen that show on A&E like most of us have, at least once, but that was my entire exposure to the process. And it's really quite something, isn't it, the intervention, the whole follow-through, and you were just telling me just before we started today that you had a call just a couple of days ago from more people who were looking to do an intervention. So is this a fairly common occurrence, or is it still sort of rare?
I wouldn't say it's rare anymore. I would say it's fairly common. Well, the intervention, global interventions in particular, they get calls every day.
Right, okay.
So, you know, I got a call from somebody that wanted to help their mother. And so I was just going through the process, and a lot of the questions that were asked were exactly what we answered on the show last week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't it handy that
Yes.
all of that, because then you had the podcast on your website at the Orchard Recovery Center. So you directed the person who was making the inquiry on the phone, well, why don't you just take a few minutes and listen to the last show that we did on the radio, because it's going to answer most of your inquiries about intervention. So, Anne-Marie, if intervention is not as isolated or rare as many of us believe it to be, then talk to us a little bit about what happens when people try to organize an intervention. I know they call you at the Orchard because they don't know where to call, and our recovery center, if you jump on Google and start going recovery centers, the Orchard's going to pop up pretty fast, so they give you a call. And as they did to Lorinda the other day, what do you tell them?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. One is, I think the reason why interventions are more common now is because people don't want to wait until their family member, their friend has to hit the rock bottom.
Right.
The intervention is about bringing the rock bottom to them, bringing the consequences of their addiction to them in a softer, gentler way than waiting for them to lose everything. So I think that's why you're seeing way more interventions now. And then, you know, just recently, my girlfriends and I actually had to put together an intervention. Another friend was really suffering. We knew that things were getting really bad, so we called her family. We called an interventionist that we knew. We had a bed ready at the Orchard waiting for her should she accept the help. Unfortunately, she didn't accept the help.
Interesting.
But, you know, we did everything that we could. We put all the information in front of her. We, you know, told her what the consequences were going to be should she choose not to take the help. And she chose not to take the help.
And
so,
and I suppose that, if anything, Lorinda, is a kind of a misconception about intervention, because I think that the myth would be, once the process begins, by gosh, we're going to get you into some kind of treatment thing, even if we have to back the rubber truck up to the front door and throw you in it and drag you away kicking and screaming. And that's simply not the case, is it? As Anne-Marie just said, some people will still, in spite of all of the facts being presented to them right there, right in front of their eyes, they still can't deal with it and walk away.
They can do that. The gift to the family is, you know, and what is often said is, we've tried everything, we've done everything, this is the only thing that we haven't done.
Right.
And then become willing to do that next extra step, and then they know, you know what, we did everything. We did everything that we could. And so the guilt that you feel as a family member, that what if, could I have done this, or this, then you've actually done everything, and you've offered them. It's not just, you should do this, and nagging and threatening and screaming and crying and whatever. It's like, you've given them a concrete solution. You're offering them, and you're giving them the gift. You're giving them the solution, and so it's their choice whether they're going to take it or not.
Right.
And we've also had with interventions, we've had where the person says no, and then later on they say yes. So it can come.
Took a while to sink in.
Yes, it might not happen that day, but it probably will happen, and even for this person that you're talking about, it will come later, possibly.
Right. Once the denial finally drops, and that's the biggest piece of addiction, is the denial.
Ego, pride,
right.
shock, denial.
But I want to spend a lot of time on today's program talking about the process of recovery, because it is a process. It is a lifelong occupation in some ways. But back to this, I just want to resolve this intervention part of the conversation. Anne-Marie, you said in the process of getting together with your friends and trying to assist this person, you called a professional interventionist. I guess that's kind of critical to making the process as effective as it could be, rather than trying to be that person yourself with little or no skill, because it really is a skill-demanding situation, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's why there's courses and accreditation now for interventionists. So, you should choose, if you are looking for an interventionist, you should choose one that has actually got their credentials to be a professional interventionist.
It's not a DIY thing. It's not a do-it-yourself. Oh, well, I can pull that off. I saw that show on TV once. Probably not a smart decision on your part, right?
No, not if you want the outcome to be that the person actually accepts the help.
That's right.
You can work with us at the Orchard. Like we do a lot of pre-admission coaching, which can be very similar to what will happen during an intervention. We can do a lot of that coaching.
Right.
And then we can also refer people to a professional interventionist if they want someone to come, physically to their home and do the process the way it was outlined.
Exactly.
Not every person needs to go through an intervention to decide that they need help, but
I think that's a good point to make, and a fair point to make too. It's not everyone. It's not a one-size-fits-all process, is it?
No.
No, some people will be presented with the facts, and offered to go to treatment, and they'll accept that.
Right.
The intervention is the last resort, when they've said no to the offers multiple times.
Right. Let's talk about the process of recovery. And it is a lifelong process. Let's talk with two people who are actively engaged in that process every day of their lives. My two guests in studio from the Orchard Recovery Center are, in fact, recovering themselves. Lorinda, you've been clean and sober for decades now, correct? 20-some years.
24 years now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yet you still see yourself in the mirror as a recovering addict, and you work on it every day.
I do, and I actually believe, for myself anyway, that the longer I have away from my last drink, which for me now is a very long time,
yes, yeah,
it almost becomes more important, because it would be very easy for me to say, it wasn't that bad, maybe I'm okay now, and I have to use the tools, and I have to, there's a saying, you have to keep your own house in order. So I have to prepare and do I wouldn't call it so much work now, but that's, I I have to be ready to handle any situation that might come my way.
So while it's not as much of a chore, perhaps, as it might be for someone who's earlier on in the process, it's something you're very aware of every day, at least, correct?
I'm aware of it every day.
Yeah.
Yes, and I feel very grateful, and I feel that being in recovery for myself has led me to be the person that I am today. I, on the most part, feel good about who I am today, and I know that I'm setting a good example for other people in my life, and that I know that I'm going to be there consistently for people who I care about.
So after 24 years, you can say, I think, with some degree of confidence and assurance, that it does get easier. It never completely goes away. You do have to, you, as I said, you're aware of it every day, but it's not as much of an uphill climb every day as it once was, just staying on the straight and narrow, right?
Yeah, well, I don't think, it'd be very rare for me to think I want to have a drink or I need to have a drink. The thought might flash through my mind. But more importantly, today for me is I like who I am today, and I like my life today, and I enjoy going about my life and having a great time, and I don't need to have unhealthy coping mechanisms in my life.
Right. Anne-Marie, now you are also in a recovery sort of phase of your life, likely to last the end of your earthly days. How long have you been clean and sober?
5 years now.
Okay. So is the recovery process a little more front and center for you on a daily basis than it is for Lorinda, given the fact that she's got 15 years on you of sobriety?
Well, I think the journey is different every day. And like Lorinda just said, you never know what's coming at you in life, which means that, you know, it's about maintaining on a daily basis what I've worked so hard to achieve.
Right.
And so some days are different. Some days are easier than others, depending on what life is throwing at me, depending on the stresses of life. But there's definitely the same, I mean, I hope that I never forget what I did in the beginning to get and stay sober, and that I continue to do those things, which for me looks like taking care of myself on a physical level, taking care of myself on an emotional level, taking care of myself on a spiritual level. And, you know, my personal recovery includes going to meetings still after this long.
Okay.
And that I'm sure will continue for the rest of my life.
How frequently now, 5 years out?
I probably go to 3 meetings a week.
Is that right?
Sometimes more. If, like, again, if my life is challenging and I'm going through something particularly difficult, I might go to more meetings where I might reach out to more people that I know that are also in recovery to talk about what's going on for me. I might, you know, there's many tools that we have. You know, for me, I seek outside help. I have a therapist that when I'm going through difficult times, I might see.
Okay.
So I don't think it's ever going to change. I think it just sort of goes in waves of how much work I need to be putting in, but I don't ever see that the work will end, that it'll just be some days are a little bit more challenging than others.
I'm sure. Lorinda, when people come to the Orchard and go through the program, is it impressed upon them as if they need it, but is it impressed upon them this ongoing maintenance thing? Just because you come here for 4 or 6 or 8 weeks, however long you've chosen to be with us, once you graduate from our program, you don't get a scroll and life is peachy for the rest of your earthly days. This is just a chance to play the game straight and sober, and it's going to take some work. Does this idea of attending meetings, developing a support network that works for you, does that begin in the first few weeks at the Orchard? Absolutely, because at the beginning what you're doing is you're healing your body, and then that happens relatively quickly for most people. And then from there... withdrawing from alcohol or narcotics or whatever. Yes, just coming back to a state where
You're physically feeling healthy.
And how long typically would that take? Is it different with narcotics than it is with alcohol, or is it all sort of roughly accomplished in 2 or 3 weeks? Physically, the actual urges and all of that, and the sweats and all of that stuff.
Well, physically, most people are feeling better within 1 week to 3 weeks, depending on the drugs that they're taking.
All right.
So, or, like Anne-Marie, you felt fine when you came in. So, not everybody's detoxing or in physical need.
Okay.
But, even just if you can think back to your last really bad hangover, if I do that, then I can think, okay, well, even for me, it was, 3 or 4 days for the fog and the emotional feelings and everything till you're sort of feeling better again.
Mm-hmm.
So, and for a lot of people that are not in recovery, at the pre-treatment stage, that's what sets you back into using again because you feel good. So physically restoring yourself to health is the beginning, and then there's what we call emotional sobriety. Ongoing maintenance.
Right.
And
this is the process.
And this is the process. It's an ongoing journey. It's like accepting life on life's terms.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever happens in your life, I could be having a great day today. Tomorrow there could be some tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to withstand any kind of crisis, that's the spiritual journey, that's the physical journey, the emotional journey, that all of those things need to be in place so that you can withstand whatever's going to come your way, and talking to other people in recovery.
Right. We need to take a break, but Anne-Marie, there sounds like there's a whole lot of relearning involved in recovery. Not only because as Lorinda just said, I may be having a fantastic day today, but who knows what's coming down the pike tomorrow? Mm-hmm. And if it's an awful thing, well, how did we used to cope with when awful days struck? Well, we had a few drinks, and well, we don't want to go there anymore. So it really does. There's a relearning of how to cope with terrible days, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think a lot of the programming that we do in the first few weeks is about learning new coping mechanisms and how to deal with stress and, breathing exercises, as simply as that. So I think, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of, just new coping skills that need to be learned. And that's what the basic program is about. It's about learning about your addiction and about learning how to deal with things differently. That's what you're going to learn in the first, few weeks of...
And beginning to put it into practice.
Right. Right, learning the skills and learning how to use the skills once you've learned what they are. Mm-hmm. This is Recovery Radio here on AM 650. Our guests from the Orchard Recovery Center on Bowen Island are Lorinda Strang and Anne-Marie McCullough. You can learn more about them during the break if you'd like at orchardrecovery.com. And we'll be right back with lots more after this.
There's still more ahead with Experts on Call, the show focused on delivering relevant and beneficial consumer information. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.